Hey everybody, it is 11 o'clock, so we are going to go on and get started on our You Ask, We Answer webinar. We are so glad that you're here today. This is actually our first ever live Q&A. So whether you're a longtime client of ours or this is your first interaction with us, we are so glad that you're here. I'm Ellie Snyder, the Director of Marketing Automation here at Enable, and we love helping churches with their technology. It is our passion, our purpose. It's why we do what we do. And so today we hope to help you guys out and answer some of your questions and how it relates to ministry and technology. So a few items before we begin, you can pause and rewind the webinar at any point. Just use the icons in the bottom left of your screen. If you joined anonymously, please put your name in the Q&A just for us to know that you were here. That's just for us. It won't go to anyone else. Also, if you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free to write those in the Q&A and we will try to get to them either at the end or as we're going. If you have a question as Andy and Phil are answering them, we'll try to get those in for you guys. And if we don't get to your question, we will post it on our recap blog post tomorrow, so you can have access to it there. I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have Phil and Andy with us today. Phil Brewer, Andy Bullington. Phil has been doing IT, has been an IT engineer for almost 20 years. So he's got ton of history and experience there. He's been here at Enable for 5 years, and him and Andy work very closely together. Andy has been in the IT world for over a decade and has been a StratCon, which stands for Strategy Consultant, for Enable for about 3 years. So these two guys have worked closely together for a long time, and we're really excited to kind of hear what they have to say. And so with that, we have them live in Nashville at our headquarters. And so they have put on their best for you today. Guys, if y'all want to wave and say hi to everybody. So they're sitting here waiting for us to ask them a bunch of questions. How you guys feeling?
Feel good.
Feel great. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning.
Yeah. So we did get a bunch of questions from y'all that we're excited to answer. So we're just going to dive right in. And if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to write that in the Q&A box, and we will get to that we'll try to get it figured out. So if you can't see them, please let us know. Okay, the first question that we got, here we go. What do you use, or how do you corral and manage all the different IT devices, operating systems, and platforms?
And I'll start that one, Andy, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm Phil Brewer. I work in a senior engineer capacity with Enable Ministry Partners. I primarily work in architecture, design, and implementation, although I do a lot of various things. Work very closely with our strategy consultants to develop solutions that further you guys' ministries. This is a good question and one that can be wrestled with in a lot of organizations. So again, the question is, what do you use, or how do you corral and manage all the different IT devices, operating systems, and platforms? And that's really a multifaceted approach, typically. With regard to IT devices such as desktops, laptops, check-in kiosks, servers, a lot of the platforms that your users are using to interact with your software applications, most of that, without regard for the operating system, is typically managed through some type of a remote agent. Any of our clients that are under agreements with us, we have remote management agents that are deployed organization-wide to manage things like updates to the operating system, whether Apple or Microsoft operating systems. Those agents also serve to provide software and hardware inventories and serve to facilitate reporting based on For example, ages of hardware, versions of operating systems that are in the organization. So that is one facet of that, are the remote management agents that are running on computers and servers in an environment. There are also lots of devices that fall under IT scope to manage and track, but they're not necessarily desktop computers that have an operating system on them. Some of that could be network hardware, such as switches, access points, firewalls, routers, etc. And another facet of that approach is network management software that goes out and discovers these devices on the network, and then has functionality to bring them into a documentation or management database, so that we can track when new equipment is installed, what its licensing is, when the subscriptions are up on that particular device, and so on and so forth. So we've got management agents for computer systems, management agents for network devices. There are also, as you well know, a myriad of devices such as tablets, phones that could be in your environment, and could be being provided by your organization. Mobile device management software is typically what is in use to, number one, manage the security and software on those types of devices, as well as serve for some reporting on what devices are in use, what departments are using what software on their particular tablet platforms. There's also a component of this that would be kind of a traditional asset management, asset inventory or asset tagging, such as maybe audio video equipment or media equipment that in some organizations may fall under IT's scope, in others it may not. But these are typically devices that are physical in a rack somewhere, and may need a kind of more static asset management, where they're being entered into and taken out of asset inventory spreadsheets or databases. So all of that is to say, we have many different methods on managing and corralling all the various devices from a technology perspective that may be in your environment. And depending on the type of device, really would dictate what platform fits for the management of that particular device. And again, as part of that, with that kind of management, we can manage the security of devices, we can manage the software on devices, we can manage the life cycle of those devices. And as a strategy consultant, those are all things that that Andy works with for our clients in an ongoing fashion, both from strategic planning on the life cycle of things to road mapping, implementation of new platforms, replacement of systems, those kind of things.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, from an overall perspective for a director of technology in any organization, having a tool to do that type of stuff is really going to set you up for success in order to budget, plan, and to refresh systems, as well as kind of know ahead of the game if you have situations in your environment that you need to address, or if there are commonalities in troubleshooting. So having those tools and having those processes in place to mitigate those are really going to be huge to help corral and manage the devices in your network.
Awesome. That's great. If the person that asked that has any follow-ups, feel free to write those in the Q&A. Guys, we did get a question while y'all were talking, and I am not technical, so I hope I pronounced this right.
Let's let that one sit till the end there. If we
Till
could.
the end. Okay, we can definitely do that. Okay, great.
Go ahead.
All right, we've got another question. So a very common question that we get is cloud versus on-premise. And so we got this one in. So what is the right choice for my organization, and how do I know which one to go with?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So this is a question I get all the time when I'm doing consulting with new clients or existing clients that have refresh cycles for their servers or their different platforms are coming up. Cloud versus on-premise. Constantly, since the push of cloud architecture, everybody has been, trying to get to the cloud. And to answer that question, one of the things that I do from a consulting standpoint is ask, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Is it a reduced footprint in server infrastructure that you're trying to maintain? Is it allowing for a more remote worker populace for your individuals to work anywhere and get to their resources from anywhere? Those are some of the big questions that need to be answered before you can dive into cloud versus on-premise. So the answer essentially is it depends. So some of the things that we like to weigh from going to cloud is what kind of internet connection do you have? Do you have enough bandwidth to support an all cloud architecture? Are the amount of endpoints that you're going to have at your location going to be able to connect and do their jobs and functions without having a lot of latency and a lot of waiting for the spinning wheel of death to finally move on? What are those department requirements that you have? If it's a church client that has a lot of media applications and a lot of application access or even remote access, trying to stream those connections to the cloud, well, that can throttle your bandwidth very significantly. And so those are things that we want to look at when we scope out a cloud architecture. Also, do you have multiple work sites? What is the workflow? A lot of organizations are getting to a point where they can work anywhere. We do that in our office. We're actually with Ellie here. She's working remotely. We're in our Nashville office. We have other offices. So us to have a cloud architecture really allows us the flexibility to be mobile and to do work anywhere. But sometimes that's not the right solution for your organization. You want them to be in the office doing the work, meeting the people. Sometimes that is a better fit for your organization. So there's not a one-size-fit-all solution. There's benefits for cloud versus on-premise. There's software as a service and there's infrastructure as a service. So software as a service would be QuickBooks Online or church management that's hosted. Those are software platforms that you can get to, but also may have an on-premise server to allow you to do the other functions, which is printing or file share access or domain services that make you reset your password. So those a mixed hybrid solution is sometimes the right thing. If you have web-based apps that make it cheaper and easier for you to do that, or if you have an offsite accountant, sometimes that's a better solution. On-premise offers centralized control. There's better compliance features that are there. That's not to say that they're not there for cloud, but the architecture's been there for such a long time at this point, they've really got it honed. And sometimes the budget and the cost for it to be an on-premise versus a hosted really depends on the scale and the amount of people in your organization. So is there anything you think you would like to add on that one, Phil? I know there's a lot to cover, and the question is one of those that it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish to answer those. So.
Absolutely. And as Andy pointed out, this one is really, there's not a one size fits all solution in general. It does very much depend on what the requirements of your organization, your ministry, and really what the capability of the applications that you use, what their capability is. Andy pointed out some good talking points. It's kind of a generic question with how can we get to the cloud, or cloud versus on-premise. It can save us a lot of money. Well, it certainly can. Being in the cloud can save you some money in some places. It can also cost you more in the long run when you really sit down and look at it. Again, it's very specific to how your organization is going to use it. Andy mentioned software as a service and infrastructure as a service. Those are kind of the two primary cloud architectures, if you will. He gave a good example of a software as a service would be something like a QuickBooks Online. For software as a service, typically you are paying a subscription fee for a application or a piece of software to be delivered to you from the cloud. The difference between that and infrastructure as a service is, or what you may be familiar with from a on-premise application standpoint, is the software vendor is taking care of any of the dependencies that it takes to deliver that application to you. So the operating system on the cloud server that is hosting that application, they are responsible for patching and maintaining security and updating the application itself without introducing any outage to the customer base. That would be a typical software as a service model. So all of the management of the server that the application is running on and the application itself is shifted to the cloud provider. Infrastructure as a service is more in line with the traditional model that you may be familiar with in your on-premise environments, where you are hosting a traditional server, a Windows or Linux server in the cloud, but you are responsible for maintaining the operating system patching, any security lockdown or patching that may be necessary there, as well as the publishing and installation of your application on that server, and then the updating and patching of the application itself. So I wanted to kind of get some clarity around the general two types of cloud services that are out there. Examples of infrastructure as a service would be something like the Microsoft Azure platform or Amazon Web Services. Both of these provide both SaaS and IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, offerings. So when we're talking about the cloud, it could technically be either of these two offerings. Andy did a good job outlining kind of some of the pros and cons with each of those. One thing about the cloud that is a big pro is it is rapidly scalable. If you need to increase capacity, increase resourcing, increase a server farm that may be hosting applications or web applications, the cloud is very easy. At the click of a button, you can expand those resources with very minimal effort. That goes both for storage and processing power. And then once your need may contract, it's very easy to spin that back down. it is a consumption-based model typically in the cloud, and is very agile and scalable. Microsoft also, as many of you may be familiar with, Microsoft's Office 365 platform, their other cloud services, Microsoft has strong incentives for the nonprofit space. So there are a lot of incentives in the Microsoft Cloud space for nonprofit organizations. And that can serve to offset your cost of entry into that by a good margin. But again, what's appropriate for the cloud versus on-premise versus maybe moving to a SaaS product, a software as a service, really needs to be evaluated for each organization.
And something I'll plug here is we do this type of consulting regularly. So it is something that comes up with all of our clients in one shape or another. So understanding what is in your environment and what is the best solution in your environment is something that we take seriously, and that we want to help guide you in the right direction in making that choice. And sometimes it's a hybrid model, sometimes it's a complete cloud model, sometimes it's, hey, cloud's not the right thing for you guys, you know. So that's something that we'll make, you know, acting in the best interest for you at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. We did, Margie asked a question I think is in relation to this. If not, Margie, maybe give a little more insight. She asked, what about work orders?
So I think that is in relation to probably the first question we had, as far as how do you corral and manage IT. Correct me if I'm wrong, but work orders for us is really a ticketing system. From an IT perspective, if you're not tracking things in a ticket perspective with time entry against the ticket, you know, problem resolution, problem statements, all of that type of information in a ticketing system, it's going to be difficult to manage systems long term and to see kind of trending issues in your environment. For us, we use a ticketing system. All of our engineers and techs and sales staff enters time daily based on the work that is performed. It gives a good ledger of process in troubleshooting and evaluating pieces that come up within those things. Oftentimes our automated systems that we use to manage the agents and the devices will generate automated ticketing for us as well that we can act on. So those are predictive issues with a hard drive failure, or, you know, high network latency, and trends that tend to happen that way, that will give us a historical look for devices within that ticketing system. So that's how we generally handle work orders. Oftentimes internally we have a scheduling coordinator that will schedule our on-site work as well from those tickets. But often the way that we structure it is a ticket gets created, we triage the ticket, and then we escalate from there. If it can be worked remotely, we work it remotely. We need to send somebody on site, we send somebody on site. If we need a senior engineer to be involved, we can do that as well. And then also if it's a bigger picture question like go into the cloud, you know, I'll be involved in those types of discussions, as well as our other strategy consultants, depending on our clients. So I hope that answers that question. That's a good one that you have there, Margie.
And I was going to say, Margie, if maybe if you could give us a little clarity on what you were intending with that. You know, in a lot of organizations, the facilities and media have their own work order systems. Sure. Where someone is filling out a form to request a room reservation, or going to be scheduling an event in one of the you know, in one of the sanctuaries or meeting areas or fellowship halls, that's going to require maybe media to bring in some audio video stuff,
air conditioning, lighting,
lighting, seating. So Margie, I apologize. You may be asking about that, and there are lots of applications that have various integrations, as well as some of even the native functionality in the Office 365 platform have some ability to generate forms and automated alerts to help a work order system function and reserve this type of stuff without knowing a little more specifics about exactly what you might be looking for. That's probably about as good as I could do at this point.
Yeah, that's great. So Margie, feel free to elaborate if you have any other thoughts and in the Q&A. So that'd be great. Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, guys. Let's get to another common question that we get. Well, actually, before we move off, we just got one more. Margie said, request that facilities set up for an event in a certain room. So
yes. And that's kind of what I was reading there.
Down the technical route on that one.
And absolutely, we actually we have a partner who does exactly that kind of thing. They have software, very robust and very friendly software that has a lot of capability around this particular function. So someone puts in a request to reserve a room for an event. From a process perspective, what needs to happen now? Okay, facilities needs to get the request, and there is lighting and HVAC. I mean, is the room available? Well, we've got to have heat on or AC on. We have got to, depending on the number of attendees, we've got to set up tables, chairs. We've got to set the room up. If there's a media component to that, what do we need from an audio video perspective? If we're having 30 people, maybe just the simple PA system. If we're going to have a need for a projector or screens, and you can kind of follow that process out when you really analyze it. There's a lot of areas that have to come together to bring an event together like that.
And I think for specifics too, this is something that goes into the consulting side of what you need your facility requests or work orders to accomplish. So a lot of that will tie into your church management if it's a church. We partner with a company called Cool Solutions, which is what Phil is alluding to here. So that's a really good one. You can look them up. We don't have a link there, but they work with some of our bigger clients, and they do exactly everything that Phil outlined there. Is they have a form that you can fill out of, I need this room at this time with these amenities, and they can work into a scheduling assistant or something like that. So that's typically what our recommendation is. But sometimes if we can utilize an existing application to get more out of it than looking at a different one, we'll try to do that when the situation arises. So.
Yeah. Great.
The key there is that when scheduling in a work order system, we want all the various parties. We want to have identified all the various departments and parties that might need to do something. We want to try to automate them getting a notification for an action that is needed.
Yeah, definitely. And we are going to put the Cool Solutions website in the Q&A, Margie, so you can get a quick link to it. Yeah. Okay, moving right along. Another really common question that we get is around vendors. So here's one that we got. Who is the right vendor and why? How do I approach that decision-making process and know that I'm making the right choice for my ministry?
That's a good one. So who is the right vendor? Something that Phil and I are heavily ingrained in is we're out of Nashville, so it is constantly growing. So we're in the middle of a lot of different construction projects, mostly for churches, some schools, and different clients that we have. And oftentimes we get requested to project manage a construction project and to put out RFPs and do a vendor selection process, and finding those that will do good work, that do quality work, that meet a budget, and all of those pieces. So knowing who those vendors are and knowing who to partner with is sometimes difficult. You know, if you don't know, okay, 3 different types of vendors and who does quality work. Checking references is a really good piece of that. Something that we do, since we have experience in this, is we usually keep a list of vendors that we like to work with that we know are going to do that quality work, because we have a fair amount of expertise in that, in those fields. If they, can do some of the IT piece of it and make sure that they're giving us the information we need to do our job successfully, that always ranks high for us. But knowing what you're trying to accomplish, going back to that, knowing what price they're going to set and making sure that's competitive is helpful, accomplishing that in an RP. Knowing the service that they're going to deliver and what is included and what is not included. What we like to make sure that they're addressing is a complete solution and their ability to deliver that solution. If it's one guy in a truck, sometimes that's hard to do when you have a 10,000 square foot building or 40,000 square foot building that you're trying to get all your cameras or door access or HVAC equipment in. You really want a good vendor to get all of those solutions put in place for you. That's something that we help coordinate with, and getting references, if you haven't worked with those vendors in your area before, is helpful. Get a client list of people that you can call on that can verify the amount and validity of their work. So one of the things that we try to do as well is not just pick a vendor. We try to partner with the vendors that we have, because we want to foster a long-term solution. If you find yourself in a situation where you're having to change vendors for a common item in your organization, well, then you haven't really found a partner. You found somebody to do a process or a work order for you. And if we can engage our vendors to be partners and to have the same common goals in mind, which is ministry or whatever your organization is about, those are things that we really value in partnering with those types of vendors. The decision-making process, what are some of the things that you think that we look for in making that decision, Phil?
Yeah, that's a good one. And as Andy said, we consult in this area all the way from helping you write out the requirements of what you might need a vendor to do, sitting down with you and codifying a scope of work that we may want to put out to some prospective vendors, and then receiving back bids or statements of work from various vendors, and sitting down and going through the analysis of each of those responses. The decision-making process, when we sit down and review that kind of stuff, much as Andy outlined, is do the bids and the responses that we have gotten from prospective vendors, does it meet all the requirements as we laid them out? Does it meet what we're trying to accomplish? Price certainly comes into play there, but rarely is that honestly the ultimate factor. The ability to deliver a complete solution and to be a partner is sometimes greater than paying a little bit more. You may find that you can have there's a lot of vendors that may come out and repair an HVAC unit, and they'll do that for you one time, and it might be fine, and you had a good price for that, but maybe they're not strategic and really a long-term partner. It may be someone else the next time that can fit that same bill. So the decision making when evaluating your vendors really needs to be looked at from a holistic point of view. Can we partner with them? Do we feel like we can have a long-term relationship with this vendor? Is their price competitive? And can they deliver a complete solution that meets the requirements that we have requested? We at Enable use a weighting system to evaluate each of these areas. And then we sit down with our clients and we kind of go through the matrix and why we landed where we did. Some vendors will have experience with previously and know that they have a track record of great service for our churches and our nonprofits. In a lot of cases, with clients who are out of state, we may not have the benefit of any of that history of working with that. So all of that to be said is there is a systematic approach in the decision making when selecting vendors. A lot of times, it's not always just based on price.
That's great.
Well said.
Perfect. So the next question that we get that someone had, it says, am I getting the most out of my applications, subscriptions, and services? How can I know all the tricks and capabilities that they can do?
Sure. So some of the examples that we get for that that come to mind, church management for one. So in church management, there are a bunch of different facets. There's accounting, there's online giving, there's check-in, there's data analytics. There are a bunch of different pieces that are in a lot of different church management. So just speaking very generally is, are you using church management for one piece of that? And what we get oftentimes is, how can I use more features within church management to accomplish other things that I'm using other tools for? So that's a very common one that comes up. We like to point out Office 365 is constantly developing their platform. So it is more of a Office solution for everything that you need to do from productivity software. So we often talk about Teams and SharePoint, which are things that you get typically with the licensing, but it's oftentimes not things that are easily adopted by organizations. So SharePoint is an online file storage that you can use for contributing to files. OneDrive for Business is another one that we consider it the local files that you have. So we call those the me and the we files, which is older terminology, but it's really helpful to know that, okay, OneDrive's my stuff. Teams or SharePoint is the we stuff that I'm going to work with a team on to collaborate between. Using things like Flow, going back to the work orders question that Margie had, we've automated some of our clients with a Forms and a Flow, which are tools that are in the Microsoft suite that allows people to fill out a work order request in a form, and then Flow allows us to generate a ticket out of that work order form. So those are some really interesting tools that a lot of people that I've encountered haven't really taken full advantage of, or don't really know that they're out there to use. So that's something to really dig into, of like, okay, if I'm going to adopt this solution, if it's a building automation solution, is there pieces that I can tie all of my building automation into that, or am I going to have to use another tool to really leverage different applications in there? We've done several webinars about choosing different applications or subscriptions. A lot of it's been church management related and Office 365 related. So I think Ellie's going to link to some of those in our notes. But when you're looking at all of that and you're trying to understand, how do I get the most performance out of it? Understanding what your applications can do, and then standardizing on an application. So what we often see is, especially in a church environment, is we'll have the media department uses G Suite, or they use Dropbox, and then the accounting department will use OneDrive for Business, and they'll use Teams and SharePoint, and then There's other people that will use different types of file sharing applications that are in there. What it tends to happen when they do that is there's not a standardized process. So you can't organizationally say, hey, this is the process. You have to train it 4 different times because you're using different applications to really accomplish the same end goal. So knowing what the right application is, standardizing on that application, getting the most out of your features within those applications is going to go a long way into getting the most out of those subscriptions and those services that you're using in your environment.
And I want to piggyback on that with just exactly what you said. Is you may be paying or you may be on an Office 365 subscription at nonprofit pricing already. And while your email is in Office 365, you may not know all of the capabilities that are available to you with that platform that you're already actually paying for and entitled to. What we find a lot of times, and it's great that Andy mentioned some of our previous webinar content, because we have done a series of Office 365 videos to highlight some of the functionality and applications and capability in Office 365 that a lot of times people just aren't aware of. And the beauty of that is you're already paying for that, or having you're on a nonprofit donation that's already paying for that. And so just knowing what's available to you helps a lot in that. And this kind of even goes back to the very first topic about cloud versus on-premise. Once you understand what capabilities are available, you can really start to clarify, well, goodness, do we really need this big file server anymore? We could move some of this to Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive, and we no longer need to maintain that server or storage. We could be using Microsoft Flow as part of a SharePoint site to generate some of these requests and notify the intended departments. There's a lot you can do there, and Microsoft is developing that. Every day they're doing something better and adding some feature set. Now, in the technology world, that can be a double-edged sword, of course.
They're definitely pushing out updates.
And that's part of getting the most out of your applications or subscriptions and services, is really knowing what all a particular platform is capable of. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Crushed it.
That's great. Okay, so this is an interesting question. What are the things that are going to come back and haunt me from an IT perspective, and how can I proactively respond to them? So I guess from some of y'all's experience in the field, what are some of those common mistakes that y'all have seen play out?
You want to start on this one, or you want me to give my spiel?
I'll let you give your spiel. You deal with this one a lot.
Yeah, I do deal with this one. So sometimes we encounter situations where just from being in technology, we have friends that are directors of IT, and we have some organizations that we've supported that have grown to be more of an in-house IT support structure. And some of the advice that I give to those directors really is they're taking on this new step or this new approach of how am I going to manage this environment and not have things come back and haunt me. So it's the common problems in an environment or some of the things that I see that are going to come back and get you. And those are the things that you do from a daily a weekly, a monthly, quarterly, and an annual perspective. And those are things that are, if you're not addressing them at the appropriate time intervals, they all tend to build up. And so things that I'm talking about are deferred maintenance. Okay, well, we didn't push updates this week. Let's wait till next week. Well, next week comes and, okay, well, now we haven't pushed updates for a month. And then, well, it's going to take too much downtime to do the updates. So let's wait till this quarter. And so those things, when done in a fashion that way, really become an issue as the time goes on. So making it a priority and making sure that those types of deferred maintenance items don't sneak up on you, because those can really cause network environments to come crashing down. And that's oftentimes when we get the phone calls of, hey, come rescue us, come help fix the things that have been deferred for so long. Outdated systems and equipment. We have gone into several environments where we see servers that are 9, 10, 11, 12 years old that we are frightened of, because we don't know if we reboot that thing, is it going to come back online? Is the entire network going to be down for the next 3 weeks because we're waiting for equipment to come in? So making sure that there is a roadmap, a plan in place to address outdated systems, to establish a workstation or a system refresh cycle, and making sure that those things are getting addressed in a reasonable amount of time. There's definitely a life cycle on equipment that's out there that you really need to think about from a director and a decision-making perspective. Unpatched devices. We see it constantly where there's some type of cybersecurity issue because a security update wasn't applied to a device. So making sure your devices are patched, making sure they're monitored, and doing that on a regular interval is going to be helpful in mitigating any kind of security issues that you may have. Ongoing user issues. We see it often with somebody has problems printing. Well, is it the printer? Is it the end user? Is it the methodology of how they're trying to print? Those types of things, if we're not tracking ongoing issues from a ticketing system or a work order request system, those are things that happen over time. And typically, if they're not getting addressed, users will get disenfranchised and they won't tell you when there are bigger problems. It is an underlying issue. But also knowing, hey, I've got this crummy piece of hardware that's out there that only works for half of my people half of the time. I should go ahead and replace that. So staying on top of those from a user reporting situation is really helpful. And those are things that are really going to come back and bite you, because it's going to be the principal of the organization's sister that works there that has these printer issues, and when they're at dinner they're going to be talking about it. So it's those things that are really going to come back and reflect poorly on you to address those common problems in the environment.
Well, and I want to pick up right there and say it's always the check-in, the two key check-in stations on the busiest Sunday of the year that go down due to some deferred maintenance, or the key pro presenter computer in an area just has an issue and is out of service and causes you some heartache during a key moment. And all of these areas that Andy just talked about, those are, and again, going back to the very first question we received from one of you in our audience about how do we keep these things corralled? How do we manage all of these IT devices? Proper management of all of this helps you plan so you don't get into a deferred maintenance or a security patching issue, and can keep everything on a cycle and running smoothly.
Yeah.
That's nail on the head as far as that goes. That's going to be the best bet for you, is to have some type of automation, because we're all human. We're all going to miss the thing. We're always going to, oh, well, something came up and I've got to defer the maintenance to some degree. But if there's some automation in there and you can just really oversee that automation, that's going to tend to do you, it's going to serve you a lot better than if you're relying on individuals to kind of update those pieces. So, yeah.
Awesome. Anything else? That one feel good?
I think we're good on that one.
Good on that one. Cool.
What do you think?
Do we have any more questions from any of the audience at this point?
Right. It's a good idea to pause. We don't have any coming in at the moment, but if anything that they've said today has caused another question, feel free to write it in here, and then we're also going to, provide a way for you guys to get in touch with us after the webinar to follow up on any of these conversations. But, continue to put those in there. We just have a couple more in, about 10 minutes left until we need to be fully wrapped up. So we'll just get through one or two of these if we can. A question that we got says, is my data protected? We hear, and here at Enable, we hear so much about like back up your data. And we hear that, I'm sorry, not here at Enable, but our clients hear that a lot. So how do we know if they're doing that enough? And how can they know if they're safe from cybersecurity crime and getting backed up regularly?
Yes. So this in general, data security is, the topic of the hour, if you will. It's no surprise to anyone that's watched the news anytime in the past several years, and some of you may even have encountered this in your own organizations, that ransomware is kind of the scare in the cyber community. There are various security issues that are out there all day, every day, from phishing attempts, which are email that arrives purporting to be from a recognized organization, but is actually from a hacker trying to trick you into clicking on a link that will then either steal your credentials or install some backdoor product to compromise your computer and network. So this is a great question. How do I know my data is protected? Everything I read says it needs to be backed up. We have backups. How do I know it's safe? How do I know that our security practices are up to par in protecting us? So there are a lot of items in that question, and we'll kind of start with the backup question. Backup as well as disaster recovery planning is essential. If you cannot afford to lose the data, then it needs to be backed up. Backup comes in various different flavors, all the way from a totally on-premise backup solution where we're backing up data to a backup device that resides in our on-premise environment. That could be, taking a drive, swapping drives out where you've always got a copy of your data and swapping those out weekly or daily. It could be a backup solution that backs up your critical data to a cloud repository. Or it could be a hybrid model where it backs up locally to a device in your environment as well as then out to the cloud. That is typically our recommended platform is a hybrid on-premise and cloud backup infrastructure. There are many reasons for that we won't get really deep into, but having critical data stored in two places versus one is always better. And so that's the backup component. But there's also a disaster recovery component. If we are backing up critical data to a location in our organization. It could even be another building on campus or another closet somewhere that's not in the server room. But if there is, Lord forbid, that there is a tornado or a regional disaster, you've lost both the primary data location as well as the backup data. And so this is what we mean by when we talk about disaster recovery, is the ability to recover from some kind of a disaster. If there were a fire on the campus and all the sprinklers came on and all the equipment was damaged, you need both a platform that from a software perspective can recover in the event of a disaster like that. And the cloud, many of the cloud platforms are suited for that, because you also have backup retention points that do not reside on premise. They are in a data center on the internet. But also a component of that is disaster recovery planning. It's something that a lot of times we don't, as an organization, as a church, as a ministry, we may not really think about. Well, what would we do in the event that there was we lost a building or a disaster? What processes would need to take place for us to continue operating? And so any data protection plan is only as good as the backup and the disaster recovery plan. So those are big items that, again, we consult and implement solutions based on. We have many different options in those areas, depending again on what the needs are. And back to our maximizing our subscriptions and services, things as simple as having maybe OneDrive for Business on your laptop that is synchronizing your data up to the cloud. If I drop my laptop, or it's stolen, or it gets broken for some reason, my data is secure in the cloud. I can still access it without my computer. From a web browser, I can get a new laptop, and all of my content is available to me right from the cloud.
Great.
I know we're running close on time. There were a few more points on this. I'll just cover them. We did the offsite and onsite. One thing I want to say is, when it comes to backups and disaster recovery, it's only as good as you have validated it to be. So if you're doing backups and they appear to be working, you need to periodically validate that by doing a test restore, by spinning things up. Even in some organizations, part of the policy may be every couple of years we need to do a DR test even. Those are the kind of things you may need to be thinking about in your organization.
That's great. Awesome. If anyone has follow-ups on that one, feel free to ask us. We did get a very technical question in just a couple seconds ago. If this is one y'all can ask or answer. Should I enable ICMP on a WAN interface? Do I say it WAN or WAN?
So this is a question that we often discuss and debate in our senior engineering group. And so ICMP, or ping, as it's more commonly known as, is a method for testing if a connection or a link is live. And doing that from a WAN interface is debatable, because that is an outside capability, being able to touch a point on your network. And so Phil and I have a similar point of view. There are other in our senior engineering groups that have a differing point of view. Ultimately, and I think we're agreed on this, is that you should disable ping on your WAN interface, or if you have multiple sites that you're testing from, create what's called an ACL, an access control list, between those sites. So if you do need to ping, that you're doing it securely between controlled sites that are allowed to do that. There is a counter argument to that capability in the event that you need to test to make sure that a site's live from an undesignated location, or from a monitoring perspective. Sometimes that is an acceptable architecture. So the answer is, it depends.
Yeah.
But it is a highly debated thing in our senior engineer group. And so I think that is one of those that we're probably getting tested on in this Q&A. So
my bad. Got it. Well, thank y'all for answering those. Y'all did a great job. Round of applause. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Yes. So again, if y'all have any anyone that's attending, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is, well, it's not listed on there, but you can go to enableministry.com and ask a question. Our phone number's on there, email, just all the ways to get in touch with us. So we would love to continue discussions with you. And I think that wraps everything up. Andy and Phil, we cannot thank y'all enough for your expertise and wisdom today. And thank you all for your questions. They were awesome.
Thank
Y'all
you,
have
everybody.
a good day.
Thank you for joining us.
All right. See ya.